What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Turn the Jets Live. I'm your host, Steven Zantz, joined by co-host Steven Russo. Steven, it's been a while. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing good, man. It has been a while, but it's good to be back. I like this. Typically we say never a dull moment, and we're just constantly just waiting for some news to drop. And it sounds like Derek Carr, maybe that first domino to fall to kind of set the quarterback market and see what happens from there. But we're on the precipice, I think. I think February is the time where we really get an answer on who the Jets quarterback in 23 will be. But overall, man, I'm doing good. It's nice to have a little breather, but it's also good to get back with you. Happy belated birthday to you. I know yesterday you celebrated your 31st, so happy birthday to you, man. And how you doing overall? How's everything?
Everything is great. I appreciate that. All the wishes from like family, friends, fans of the show. It's awesome. But yeah, Cromartie year, baby, 31.
There you go.
I tweeted yesterday that I was like, I hope I don't have to wait another 31 years for the Jets to finally win a Super Bowl. Hopefully before then, right?
Yeah, seriously.
But yeah, like you said, Derek Carr, first domino probably to fall. He met with the Saints, so there's obviously some mutual interest there. It's interesting because if I'm him, I'm like, I'm gonna wait it out versus like getting my contract observed, because like he may actually feel like he should, take visits, see like what everyone's pitching him, and also he can redo his contract completely. And I mean, that's what I would do, but it seems like they're the front runner. So if that domino falls, then you got to assume that the Jets are going to pivot directly to Rodgers. I think it's pretty apparent that Rodgers is the number one target for us right now. Whether that means that we get him, I don't know, because I don't work in the front office, but there's a lot of people connecting the dots. I know there was a lot of smoke about the Raiders. It seems like it's just like I think Joe said this, that like last week was Raider week, the week before was Jets week, when they're asking him about it on Pat McAfee's show. I mean, he said that he's going into a 4-day like hideaway, probably going to be tripping on some ayahuasca, whatever the hell that he takes to figure out what he wants to do, sit in darkness, and then a decision will come. I know our friend Meeks made the comparison to Entourage when they went to Joshua Tree when Vince was trying to figure out what movie to do.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. What are you thinking so far between Carr and Rodgers right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been I think option one was always Lamar Jackson, but I think that ship has clearly sailed. I don't see the Ravens not re-signing him. I know the reports are that they're $100 million off, but I just feel like that'll get done. Even if it doesn't and they trade him, it won't be within the conference. So I think Lamar's out. The next best option is obviously Aaron Rodgers. And at this point, it kind of feels like Aaron Rodgers and then everybody else. I was in the camp that Derek Carr would be a better option than I think a lot of people, and specifically a lot of Jets fans, were giving him credit for. But it just really never seemed to materialize like the Jets had legitimate interest. It felt like Carr was a veteran, solid QB that became available, that was going to become available. And the Jets are obviously a team that is clearly in need and wants a veteran quarterback. And you just figure that those two things will mesh and there will be mutual interest, but that really never felt like it got off the ground. So at this point, and I know that we have nothing to do as Jets fans, but sit here and let this marinate in our brains and kind of, figure everything out. So it just feels like we've just been kind of sitting and thinking about this too long, but it does kind of feel like we're putting all of our eggs in the Rodgers basket, and that it's like Rodgers as number one option, and then there's everybody else. So I think, based on what we're hearing, I know Connor Hughes was all over this, that it was the worst kept secret at the Senior Bowl. And, the Jets obviously are all in on Rodgers. And honestly, I mean, you got to figure everything outside of whether or not Rodgers would want to actually play in New York, and with the, New York media, that I think is a little bit overblown anyways. But everything else kind of lines up to say, the Jets, if he decides to leave Green Bay, would be the best option for him and would be his best option to actually win another ring. But we'll see, man, because honestly, if whatever their plan B, C, D are, it's definitely not as good as Aaron Rodgers. And it kind of feels like it's Rodgers and everybody else. And I'm not sure how close any of those other options are.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm more bullish on Carr than a lot of people are. I mean, obviously, to me, Rodgers is the clear-cut favorite. I think a bunch of us were talking about this in the TOJ Slack like a couple weeks back. It's like you're watching the AFC Championship game and you're seeing guys like Burrow and Mahomes going head to head, and your feeling is as good as the Jets roster is, and I think the Jets have a better defense than both those teams. I mean, I don't think that's like unfair to say. The Jets corners are amazing. They have a great defensive line. I mean, they definitely have some weaknesses in the middle of the field, specifically one of the linebacker spots in safety. But, you feel good about that defense. You think that they can contain guys like that. But the question is, can a guy like Derek Carr, maintain that pace? I mean, I think he's only beaten Patrick Mahomes once, in his career, and they obviously play twice a year since 2018 when Mahomes became the chief starter. So you worry about stuff like that. With that said, I mean, I think Carr is, the floor. I think the floor is high, but the ceiling is low, if that makes sense. I mean, I don't think he's the kind of guy that's going to be like the way he was in 2016 when he was an MVP candidate and he got hurt, unfortunately. And then they had to put Connor Cook out there in that playoff game, I think, against the Texans, and they lost and got crushed. But at the same time, I just, I think you could do worse. I mean, I know people don't, love Jimmy Garoppolo. My personal opinion, and this is just opinion based on things I've read, kind of connecting the tea leaves, is that if they don't get Aaron Rodgers, I really think that Jimmy G is going to be the guy. And it just makes a lot of sense. I mean, you could make the argument that Carr, but I feel like Carr will be settled before that. Yeah. But Saleh knows him. He knows Saleh. They have a long-standing relationship. I think the offense that Nate Hackett, who we'll talk about in a little bit because you and I have never recapped that, is definitely going to be similar to what Jimmy's been used to in San Francisco. I think the key is, though, if you're going to sign a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, you have to get someone who's a high-level backup, because you can't go into next year with Zach as the backup specifically. Like, if you're really trying to rehab Zach, he just needs to watch, learn, and just like take it all in slowly at this point. I mean, I'm sure, and I put this in my column this past week, that there's going to be like this like random week in like May or June or whatever before camp kicks off where like Zach looks so good in like mini camp and OTAs and whatever. They're trying to pump up that value. You'll see a couple of those leaks, even though Rich Samedi actually had a nice little hit piece about Zach and LaFleur that came out today. But I think the Jets are going to try to pump up that value. And if there's no takers, maybe like a 5th round pick at best at this point, they're going to keep him here and see if that, if just sitting back and watching could really help him and maybe develop him into a high-end backup at this point. But I think the ship has sailed. But I really think it's going to come down to probably Rodgers and Jimmy G. And maybe if Jimmy G doesn't work out, let's just say he goes to the Raiders and Rodgers stays put, retires, whatever it may be, Tannehill is probably the 4th guy there, even though there isn't a confirmation that Tannehill is going to be gone. Right. I think it's more everyone connecting the dots because Tennessee seems like they're in a weird spot where they have Malik Willis, who to me didn't really look like a quarterback. They have Dobbs. I'm not sure if he's a free agent or not, but I just feel like they're ready to move on. And the way the roster is shaping up, they don't have like a lot of good weapons, which is why they don't really make sense to me as a spot for Rodgers. I know people have been saying, he's building a house down there, maybe like, living in the South would fit his lifestyle. I don't know the guy personally. I can't speak on that, but to me, the team is not good enough for his liking unless he just really likes Vrabel and wants to live in Tennessee. But what are your thoughts on, my takes about Jimmy G potentially being the clubhouse favorite if we don't get Rodgers?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And I think you're spot on. But the biggest concern, I think, in a vacuum, Jimmy G is a solid number 2 option to Aaron Rodgers. I think the biggest problem is durability. And so much of that decision is contingent upon what they do with the number 2 position. Because if you're going to roll in to next season with Jimmy Garoppolo as your starter and Zach Wilson as your backup, that doesn't make anyone feel good because that Zach Wilson is definitely on the hook for probably 4 to 6 starts, because that's just historically what Jimmy Garoppolo has done is he consistently gets hurt. So knowing that, you'd have to have a number 2 option that's not Zach Wilson, whether it's bringing back Mike White, but then the injury concerns come back with Mike White there. So I really, it's, again, we've given this so much time to marinate that it's boom or bust, and it's all for Aaron Rodgers. And that's kind of what it feels like. But if you ask me right now, I mean, I'm lukewarm on Jimmy G solely because of that injury history. I think I'd prefer options like Tannehill or maybe even a guy like Jacoby Brissett more, just because of that injury history and that consistency. But still, I do think that kind of reading the tea leaves, it does feel like plan B, if they were to miss out on Rodgers, would be a pivot to Jimmy Garoppolo. But, it's it's really interesting. You look around the other options. I mean, I really do feel like the Jets are the best. I mean, to come in, what they have, you patch up a few spots on the offensive line, you get, a solid number 2 receiver, which I think they'll do. And if you get a guy like Aaron Rodgers, obviously that draw becomes a lot more, looks a lot better, right, for prospective guys. And you already have a top 5 defense in play here. So I think, the potential to win, I think Saleh is a well-liked and well-respected coach. I think clearly there's history there. So for Aaron Rodgers, I do think that, like we were saying, if he decides to leave Green Bay, I think the Jets are really the best option for him. And I think everything kind of tees up nicely for them. Whereas you look at the other places that he could go. He already said no to San Fran. You look at the other option in Vegas, and what's really there besides Devontae Adams. Now that's obviously a big thing. But really that's kind of their only hook. You look at the Jets and what they have, the young talent across the board, top 5 defense, Nathaniel Hackett, really a team that's kind of built to win with those, those weapons, young weapons specifically. That's just what it feels like, man. So I'm holding out hope that it's Aaron Rodgers, but I think plan B would probably be to pivot to Jimmy G at this point.
Yeah, I mean, look, Alex in the chat was saying it's like it'd be a massive mistake if they don't even do diligence on Carr, but like I think the problem is that he may pivot quickly, which I'd mentioned in the chat. We got another question from the Joker 201. Wouldn't Tannehill be better than Jimmy, and would you trade for Love if Rodgers stays? That's a good question. It's a challenge with a guy like Love, and I think it's intriguing just because it's untapped potential. Because I think he has he has one career start, and I think he filled in nicely in that Eagles game, even though it was a blowout. I'm interested. The only thing is like, you could be going down the Zach Wilson road versus getting a proven commodity, whether the guy is, a lower ceiling, but at least he's an NFL quarterback. That's the thing. It's like the Jets just need solid quarterback play to not only, give them a chance to win football games every week, but also to make sure that guys like Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, the tight ends, whomever else they bring in as pass catchers, because there's been rumblings about both Corey Davis and Braxton Berrios being cut. You just need someone who to feed them reps so their development doesn't get stunted. Specifically, a guy like Elijah Moore, who basically his second year in the NFL was like a waste, which sucks. But look, Rodgers to me is the guy that I want. It's the guy that, like you said, it just makes a lot of sense. The only thing here is do they not? Does he not want to live in New York? Because football wise, they do have a really solid roster with the exception of the quarterback spot right now, and they need a left tackle. But you would assume that they're probably going to take a left tackle at 13 in the draft. That's what everyone's been mocking to them at this point, but it's so early to tell because number one, free agency hasn't happened. Also, the combine is in a couple of weeks away, and that's typically when you start to hear a little more smoke about where teams are leaning, and the Jets are picking in the middle of the first round. So it's like you have no idea how that board's going to fall. But yeah, to me, Rodgers makes the most sense from a football standpoint. It's just a matter if he wants to play here or, if he wants to retire. Yeah.
And to answer the question, so would I prefer Tannehill over Jimmy G? I think I would. I think Tannehill has a bit of a higher upside. He's older. I think Tannehill's 35, which is kind of shocking.
I know. It's crazy.
It doesn't feel like he's that old. But if you kind of look at the history, there are injury concerns, but he played, going back to Miami, he played 11 games in his final season there. Then he started 10 games at Tennessee, but that's when he took over for Mariota. Then it was 16, 17, and 12. So the injury history, I think, is more from the middle part of his career as opposed to the latter. Whereas Jimmy G, I think, has been hurt in every season that he's played. So just from an injury standpoint, I do think that Tannehill will be a better option for me. And I also think he's got just slightly higher upside. I think he throws a nice deep ball, and I think that's something that this team has lacked really tremendously over the course of the last few years. In terms of Jordan Love, it's a huge coin flip. You're taking a big swing, but it's one that I think I'd be willing to do considering I guess it would depend on how everything else in the QB market shakes out. If Jimmy G or Tannehill isn't an option and you're kind of left with you trade for Jordan Love, depending on what the compensation is, but I don't think the Packers would recoup a first rounder for Jordan Love, given their situation and given just kind of the unproven part of it. But if you're talking about, Jordan Love potentially being the long-term answer versus bringing in guys like a Jacoby Brissett or a Gardner Minshew, I think I'd probably take a swing on the higher upside guy in Jordan Love. I think the downside to that is you're really getting him on the back end of that rookie contract. So you're not really getting any benefit from that because they're what? I think I saw the report today. They got to decide on the 5th-year option by May. Right?
Yes,
I think
yes.
that's accurate. So either way, that's what you're missing out on. But as we kind of come to know, I think the salary cap is a farce. Look at the Saints year in and year out are like $50 million over the cap, but somehow have room to figure out the Derek Carr situation and make all these moves. So I think that's kind of, if my options, if you were to rank them, kind of one is Rodgers, 2 in that second tier would be a Jimmy G and a Tannehill, with Tannehill getting the slight edge, and then 3 would be a Minshew, Brissett, and if Jordan Love's available, I'd probably put him a notch above those other 2.
You left out Carr. Is that you're saying you're assuming that Carr's off the board?
I'm kind of assuming Carr's off the board. I think it's 1 Rodgers, 2 is Carr, 3 I would put Jimmy G and Tannehill kind of on that same tier, and then 4 are the Minshews, the Brissetts, and then if Jordan Love actually became available.
Alex in the chat just said to me, I despise Heineke, way too turnover prone. I just mean retain Mike White at that point. I like Mike White. The issue is that you run into the same thing with Jimmy G. So you sign Jimmy G and then you make Mike White the backup. You have 2 guys who've proven that they can't stay healthy. So I don't know, man. I mean, I love White. I think he's like a good locker room guy. Everyone seems to like him. There was, it seems like he was one of the most respected guys in the locker room because he was just a real honest guy. But you gotta have someone that that can play and that the team doesn't collapse because the quarterback can't move the ball. But I think, listen, whoever the starter is, let's hope that they can play 16 games and the 17th game not happening because they clinch a playoff spot and they rest their starters. Like that's the hope here. I mean, this team needs to make the playoffs or, everybody's jobs are on the line, in my opinion.
It's just the reality of the NFL. I mean, you look at, the NFC Championship game and, Brock Purdy and Josh Johnson both went down. I mean, you need guys that can step in. You need guys that can play. And Mike White has proven, like, in spots, he can be fantastic, but he's also proven to be extremely fragile. So you can't rely on that. But I do think that Mike White is kind of the perfect backup. And I know that Connor Rogers alluded to it on Badlands. Like, you look for what teams really look for in a backup is a guy that doesn't turn the ball over and can just make the throws and do the check downs and stuff like that. And that's exactly what Mike White can be. So to look at him as your, plug and play starter for next year, I don't see it. But if they bring him back as a backup, I have no problem with it. I do think he needs to bulk up, though. I think that's a big thing about what'll keep Mike White healthier, moving forward in his career. The other thing, and I want to go back to a point that you brought up, you think about, like, you look at the AFC Championship and you got Burrow versus Patrick Mahomes and, the gauntlet that is the AFC. But honestly, like, get yourself to the dance and see what happens. See what happens. Like, anything can happen from that point. But if you get in the dance, if you get to the playoffs and figure it out from there, I mean, this is a QB dominated league. And you're going up against the likes of Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and Patrick Mahomes every year. But at the same time, like, we're not far removed from seeing Peyton Manning basically with no arm make and win the Super Bowl.
All right, that defense is historic, though.
Yeah, but you know what? But this is the reality of the league. Like, you saw guys not long ago, like Blake Bortles make the AFC Championship, Case Keenum take his team to the AFC Championship, like Brock Purdy. Granted, I mean, this is so. All I'm saying, I'm not saying that these guys are in the same caliber. All I'm saying is we're Jets fans. We've been 12 years now in the dumps. No playoff appearances, 1 sniff at it. Well, 1.5 if you count this year as a half sniff. Like, get yourself to the dance, and anything can happen from there. We've seen crazier things. So that's all I'm saying. You're not gonna, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, they don't grow on trees. You're not gonna get that guy, but the hope is that you can build a team that's good enough around whoever you get at QB to compete. And some kind of lightning strikes, magic happens once you get to the playoffs, and then you make a run.
Agreed. We did get one question I did answer in the chat from BJ. He's saying, why prefer the Jets to sign Jimmy G? You should just keep Mike White. To me, it's like Jimmy G has shown that he can win games. I mean, he got to a Super Bowl. The Niners made to the NFC Championship game last year when he was a starter. I know he missed his time, but like, he's proven more than Mike White. Mike White, you're banking on potential versus something that's proven. And his response was better off signing Nick Mullins. He's like, don't need more Shanahan scheme guys. But like, I don't know, man. I think, the offense is going to be similar. But of course, I'd rather Rodgers. Rodgers is the number one choice. I don't know if you
Yes,
tuned in the middle of this, but yeah, Rodgers is the guy.
absolutely.
But one of the comparisons I made is how Jimmy G has a little bit of Alex Smith to him in the sense that like he wins. I want guys who win games. The Jets lost 6 games in a row. That sour taste is still in my mouth. So I get it.
I know, me too. And who made the comment like during the season that Mike White's kind of like store brand Jimmy G? Whoever that was, it may have been Connor Hughes, but I like that.
I did like that.
That's exactly what it is. I just think, I think they're very similar. I think they are, capable quarterbacks. They're not going to light the world on fire, but the one biggest hangup is their injury. They're injury prone. And that's it. And that's the same story for both of them. But when you talk about upside and you talk about, Steven, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, Jimmy G is a proven commodity. He's made it to a Super Bowl. He wins. I mean, Kyle Shanahan's record with Jimmy Garoppolo versus without, outside of this season, really, but speaks for itself.
Agreed. This guy BJ is pretty funny in the chat. He's saying how I guess you guys still have your heart in your sleeves for LaFleur. How much did you cry when LaFleur left? And I'm like, nah. I said, let's see how he is with McVay, and he's like, I remember how much you guys fangirled over him. He's going to be a head coach candidate one day. So my thoughts here, and this has actually been a lot of fun with the chat and everything, and the Discord and from Badlands has definitely helped with this. I think that he showed a lot of creativity that we weren't seeing from past Jets offensive coordinators. I get it. I understand why they made the move. And like, the only issue was, what's the alternative? And I've seen mixed reviews, mostly negative towards Nate Hackett. I mean, I'm more bullish on Hackett because I think he's shown he can call plays. I mean, I don't think he's, this guy who's going to be getting another head coach opportunity. I think his results speak for itself, but he's a proven offensive coordinator. At worst, he's like an average offensive coordinator who showed he could take Blake Bortles to an AFC championship game. But yeah, I think LaFleur deserved like what happened, but like, it doesn't necessarily mean it was the right decision. Hopefully Hackett's better. Hopefully the quarterback can obviously produce, but I don't know. I think, why did Sean McVay hiring Mike LaFleur? Clearly a guy who has a good eye for talent in the coaching community went after him. He could have went to somewhere like, I don't know, what's a team that's probably going to tank this year? Like the Texans? I don't know, but even they're on the rise.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, first of all, and I think this has been said, but I'll say it again. I think the loss of Greg Knapp prior to the 2021 season hurt this Jets offense and offensive staff so much more than anyone could qualify or quantify or anything like that. And then the absence of having a proven voice and a kind of a senior voice in the room, I think the effects of that were felt as you got into the tail end of this season. I think Mike LaFleur was kind of the benefactor of following up Adam Gase and Dowell Loggins, which he showed creativity. They were able to move the ball, in 2021 with 4 different quarterbacks. He showed an ability to be self-reflective, which is something that I think the staff does well, but he showed it. And that was something that Adam Gase and Dowell Loggins couldn't do. And then for the first part of 2022, I mean, the Jets were 7-4 and they lit the world on fire against Chicago with Mike White as their QB. And they hung in there against Minnesota and Buffalo. And then, the wheels fell off. And I think, unfortunately, Mike LaFleur just happened to be the fall guy. When you look at it objectively, like going from LaFleur to Nate Hackett doesn't feel like an upgrade. I think the experience is what gives Nate Hackett the nod, but so much of what we think, if not all of what we think of this Nate Hackett hire, is contingent upon who they get at quarterback. And that's really going to determine the answer because, and I know that Joe Caporoso has said this too, does Jacoby Brissett and a Nate Hackett pairing excite you? No. But does Aaron Rodgers and Nate Hackett excite you? Absolutely. So much of what we think about what this offensive staff is going to look like is really based on what quarterback they end up landing.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. The one thing I was going to ask you is like, what's going on with Calabrese? Because I was like convinced he'd be let go. And I think that they're waiting, obviously if they get like a senior assistant, but like, I'm surprised that he's still on the staff, but I feel like things are going to change.
I am too. I don't know. I didn't think he would make it. The bringing in of John Beck in 21 and then firing LaFleur and firing Benton, but maintaining Calabrese on the staff just didn't make sense. And I would imagine it's kind of a wait and see approach. And whatever happens, as the offseason progresses, or whatever quarterback they get. And then, like you said, if they're going to bring in a senior offensive assistant as they kind of round out that staff, I think that'll determine if Calabrese is safe or not.
For sure. This is so funny. How does Calvary still have a job? I know he's a Boomers guy, but come on. It's funny, man. So let me ask you something. What are your thoughts like in terms of like additions in free agency? Safety is a huge need. I've been saying Jimmy Ward makes a ton of sense. I mean, they definitely could go another direction. I think he could be a little more expensive, but I feel like Saleh is definitely going to want his guy. And I saw DJ Reed was recruiting him on Twitter recently. So what are your thoughts on Jimmy Ward potentially backfilling Joyner?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I think, Joyner leading the team in interceptions this year is one of the bigger surprises of this past season, but I just think they need a guy that's more of a ball hawk. I do think that Whitehead kind of got a bad rap. I think he's more of a box safety. I think that's where he excels. There were times where he missed tackles that led to big plays, and Joyner did that as well. But I think pairing him with more of a ball hawking safety would be, obviously a big improvement and something that you would see benefit the defense a lot. I think, we spoke about it at the tail end of the season. I think Sauce and DJ became so good that teams just wouldn't even try them and were attacking the middle of the field. And I think I wrote it in my article. It was something like, tight ends against the Jets had like over 90 catches for over 1,100 yards. And that's just because they were eating the middle of the field up because they wouldn't throw outside. So getting a guy like a Jesse Bates or a Jordan Poyer or, even Jimmy Ward, I think would definitely help the defense. And that's a swing that I would take, but I'd like to see them take more of an aggressive approach in free agency to a more ball hawking safety, someone that can pick the ball off. Like that's what we need.
I mean, I know Connor and Joe were saying how small and slow they were in the middle of the field, and they do need some size. That's the key right now.
Yeah.
I think Jesse Bates will probably be too expensive. I don't think that Joe Douglas is going to want to spend a lot of money on a safety when he's already paying Jordan Whitehead, who people are asking to be cut. I don't think he's going to be cut. I think if he's ever going to be cut, it's probably going to be after this season because you never know. But I don't know. I think middle of the field, they could definitely need to draft an inside linebacker because Mosley's getting older. I would imagine, and I said this, I think that they're going to re-sign Quincy to a more team-friendly deal unless he gets priced out. But I feel like Quinnen's going to be like, if you're going to pay me, I want you to pay my brother too, which, that sometimes these little handshake agreements are like package deals. But they definitely need to find somebody in the middle of the field. I would love, and I don't think it's realistic, a guy like David Long from Tennessee. He's West Virginia guy. That's my school, but you never know, man.
Well, the other thing is too, like you look back, and not to interrupt you, but you look back at that 21 draft classes, there's some question marks there now, but the two guys, the converted safeties, Jamie and Sherwood and Hamza Nasruddin, it's like those guys were supposed to be, projects, but at the same time, like, are we really waiting till year 3 for them to even get on the field and contribute? Like that was the Jets' biggest problem from their linebacking core was they couldn't cover. Quincy's good, but he's a boomer bust player. Like he's missing a lot of plays. He doesn't make any plays really in the passing game. CJ Mosley obviously was solid. He's a Pro Bowler. On the other side, Quan I feel like was good, but kind of fell off as well. So you look at like that should be Saleh's MO is finding guys in the mid rounds that can come in and contribute. And really those two, I mean, would we call them failures at this point? Draft pick, project draft pick converting from safety to linebacker. They haven't really been able to get on the field and contribute. So it's just, But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. It's all good. It's all good. But I think they definitely need to look in the interior if they can. I feel like they're going to draft a center. I mean, or if it's not necessarily a center, somebody who has versatility that can play both guard and center because, with the exception of Elijah Vera-Tucker, you would imagine Max Mitchell's going to battle for a job. You never know with Becton. He looks good, but I'm going under the assumption that Mekhi Becton is not going to give us much just because what evidence do you have at this point that the guy's going to do anything? I would love for him to be rookie Mekhi Becton, but
you can't bank on him to contribute anything.
You can't.
You have to operate as if he's not there. And if he comes back and can play, it's a bonus.
It's amazing. I mean, look, everyone's been making, assumptions because I think he doesn't work with Duke anymore that maybe he thinks are going to be better for him. I don't know what goes into his training regimen and why maybe it wasn't working, but listen, if he could be a contributor, that'd be great. I have no idea what's going to happen with Dwayne Brown, but yeah, you never know. But we actually got someone who said they'd let Quincy walk and let Sherwood bow with a vet for a starting linebacker job. I'm not sure. I'm not okay with that. I think Sherwood is more of like a special teams guy, maybe situational when the guy needs rest, but I would definitely not bank on him being a starter from the 2 years we've seen of his play. It just hasn't been good enough to even just entrust him with that. What do you think about that, Steven?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I think if these guys were good enough to start and get playing time, I think you would have seen them thus far. And they haven't. And they haven't been able to do that. They haven't been able to get on the field. So it's just one of those things, I think, banking on that. And then, at the same time, like, what veteran are you bringing in? I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked at the linebacker free agent market religiously, but I would assume that guys like Quincy Williams and Quan Alexander are probably atop that list. So
Quan's lucky to be here. I can guarantee you that.
And that's the thing, especially if they pay Quincy. So it's one of those things, like, who are you going to bring in to compete? I mean, across the board, when you look at the Jets still do have holes. So like, when you look at it, you're probably going to have to ask, a young guy or two to fill into one of those gaps. Is it a Tony Adams at free safety? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Is it a Hamza Nasruddin? Is it a Jamie Sherwood? Like, I would like to say, like, at interior defensive line, it'd be Jonathan Marshall, but he got picked up, off the practice squad. So there's all those kinds of question marks, and you really just don't know what you have in those guys. But you got to believe that, one of those mid-round picks from this regime will slot in somewhere, even like an undrafted free agent like Tony Adams. You got to figure one of them will kind of slot in somewhere, just because there's simply not enough cap space to go out in free agency and fill every need you have.
Yeah. So I just looked at the list of available like top linebackers. Two guys that are interesting. Leighton Vander Esch. I know he was really good as a rookie and just kind of tailed off, but he could be an interesting flyer that's like low risk, high reward. Or a guy like Tremaine Edwards. Why not make your divisional opponent get worse and steal a player from that defense?
Yeah.
Those are intriguing guys. I don't think they're going to be super expensive. I think a guy like TJ Edwards, I think the Eagles will try to keep, especially coming off a Super Bowl appearance. Who knows what's going to happen in the game on Sunday? Yeah. But yeah, I'm interested by Vander Esch. I know people are mixed on him, but he's somebody that I would take a flyer on. What do you think?
I mean, I like it. Yeah, it's just from the linebacker perspective, like Leighton Vander Esch, I think what the Jets need is coverage skills. I don't know if Leighton Vander Esch kind of provides that for them. A guy like Tremaine Edmonds, yeah, you'd love to steal it. You steal a guy like that from a divisional opponent, but I'm not sure if does you really get, he plays the same exact position as CJ Mosley, who's another middle linebacker. Like, I don't know if that solves your problem. I think the Jets play pretty much, base nickel, but at the same time, you still need guys that can cover. So it's really a big question mark, but I'd probably err on the side of going to, like a third or fourth round draft pick and throwing them in the mix and banking on Saleh being able to find a guy kind of in his realm of specialty there to come in and contribute.
Yeah, I mean,
albeit the track record, as I'm saying that, 2 minutes ago, isn't that great. But those are converted, positional players from safety to linebacker. So maybe you go out and you just get a guy that's played the position that can come in and contribute. Because I think that's one of the positions where you don't necessarily need to be a first round pick to come in and make an impact immediately.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like, they'll probably sign some guys. I don't want them getting someone like Jarrad Davis. That was the worst signing of the Douglas era by far. Yeah. That was just so miserable. And it was the first thing they did in 2021. I was like, what? Like, I know he was like a first round pick, so like maybe he could be like the reclamation project, but God, that was
such a letdown. So that's such a letdown. Like, you're looking forward so much to free agency starting, and it's like, who? Yeah. Wasn't
the Giants in the playoffs? I feel like he was, right? He was like filling.
I honestly don't know. I really don't know. But anyway, so I got a question for you. So, talking big picture, do you really think, despite what Woody Johnson says, do you really think there's a playoff mandate at One Jets Drive?
Yes, absolutely. There's no way that there's not. I think Woody just doesn't want to, make those headlines, but he's probably said to them, if you guys don't make the playoffs, you guys are all fired, because it's been far too long. Joe Douglas has been given, I guess it's been 5 years now, I guess 4 with him actually running the show, even though the 2019 season actually helps his resume versus hurting it, even though it wasn't his guys other than like Khalil. But yeah, I mean, I like Saleh. I hope that he can figure this out. I think he did an amazing job with the defense, but the team faded down the stretch, and I do put that on him. But There were injuries to a lot of key guys like Brees, ABT, instability at the quarterback position. I'm trying to think who else, a couple other guys, offensive line.
Offensive line in general.
Yeah, offensive line in general. I mean, the defense was relatively healthy, but the one thing that sucks is that you would imagine that with the defense being so healthy in 2022, that some guys are probably going to miss time because that's the nature of the sport.
Yep.
So, I'm going to, hopefully trust Salah that he could figure those holes out that are inevitably going to happen. But let's hope that we get better luck on the offensive side of the ball so we can score some touchdowns.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think publicly coming out and saying, if they don't make the playoffs, that Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh are fired, I don't think that's a good look. I don't necessarily think that's the motivating factor that anybody in their place of employment needs. However, behind the scenes, yeah, there's definitely, if they don't win 10 games and or make the playoffs, I think this is the last season for both of them, which is sad because I like both of them, and I think they've done.
Yeah, I want them to work out. I do.
Yeah, me too, and they've done a commendable job. I do think that absolving Joe Douglas of any and all blame in the Jets, being what they are at this point, I think is, it shouldn't be done. I think he has done some good things. I think he's done some bad things. I think the same goes for Robert Saleh. I think you're absolutely right that he doesn't get enough credit for the defensive turnaround and what happened, but at the same time, like, he needs to get some blame for the fact that this team was 7-4 and then faded completely, losing 6 games and ending up 7-10. I think a lot of that was bad luck, but at the same time, now that we've had some time to, it's not like I'm sitting at home, like just thinking about the Jets and how 2022 season played out. But at the same time, like, you kind of think, okay, well, they pulled one out against Cleveland that, they were pretty lucky. They were the benefit. Like, I'm not going to complain because we're Jets fans. Like, we've seen the likes of disgusting quarterback play.
Luke Falk is the always one that comes to
mind.
But
they were the benefactor of playing, some backup QBs and stuff like that. So when you think, but they came out with some big wins against, Josh Allen and, Aaron Rodgers. They beat, Green Bay in Lambeau. Like they, whether it's Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett, like they did, they went to Pittsburgh and beat them. But at the same time, like, you kind of think about these other things and I guess too much time. It makes you think like, okay, how good was this season really? But at the end of the day, 7-4 was 7-4. You got to give them credit for getting there. At the same time, you have to blame them for losing the last 6 and missing out on a golden opportunity to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, the playoffs are wild. You never know what can happen. Think about Jacksonville. They were down 27-0 and beat the Chargers. Like, anything is possible.
Yeah.
Someone put in the chat, hot take, I think there's a playoff mandate for Salah, but there is a possibility where Joe Douglas gets one more crack at a head coach without playoffs next year. I don't want Woody hiring another GM. And he said, I get that it's probably inevitable at some point, but Woody's miserably bad at hiring people. Yeah, I mean, he's not a good owner, so I get it. I don't really trust him either, but it's hard to survive, 2 head coaches, whiffing on the number 2 pick, whiffing on a left tackle. I mean, it's, people want to say that, Salah is more responsible, but at the end of the day, the GM has his fingerprints all over the team. And like, he's more involved with the week to week stuff than people want to realize. I mean, it's hard. I don't trust Woody either. I get it. I understand.
Like, I'm not saying that Woody is, the best owner in all of sports. He's not Steve Cohen. Like, but at the same time, like, I don't know why he gets such a bad rap. Like, listen, he's been owner of the team for 22 years. And for the first 10 of them, they were a very good team that made the playoffs more often than not. Like, so I don't see what has really happened over the last 12, especially with him being 4 years, he was obviously still involved, but 4 years in London. I don't understand where all the hate comes from. Like, yes, okay. I think his biggest.
No, I understand it.
His biggest mistake was hanging on to Rex and firing Tannenbaum. Like, that set the franchise back, because then you pigeonholed yourself into trying to hire a GM and pairing them with Rex Ryan. So that limited the candidate pool, and then it gets you to John Idzik. Now, that decision set you back clearly. But after that, I mean, I think he's shown patience. I think he's not the best owner in the world, but
he spends. I can't get him on.
He does. Yeah, he does spend. So like, he wants to win. Clearly, I'm not a Woody Johnson apologist or defender. At the same time, I don't think you can just look at the last 12 years and say he's a terrible owner when the first 10, the team had, pretty consistent success.
Yeah, it's right. It's very fair. I mean, also people would always say that, he would be too quick to fire people. I mean, Gabe McCagnon, like what,
he's
5
been
years?
Almost too patient.
Yeah,
right?
Except with Itzik, which I understood that.
But Itzik, when you got rid of Rex, you had to get rid of Itzik as well because he needed to correct that mistake.
Agreed. I mean, they should have left Tannenbaum alone. I know that's been something people have said for a while, but they didn't have a quarterback. And when there's no quarterback, there's always a blame game. You're going to blame one guy, and then the other guy has to deal with the mess.
Yes, and I think that was also like Woody needed a fall guy for the Tebow move, and he's not going to fire himself because we know that he was a driving force behind Tebow. If you're going to fire Tannenbaum, what you should have done was fire Tannenbaum and Rex after the 2012 season. That should have been what had happened. Then you get a fresh start. You let the new GM come in, pick the head coach, and then things changed after that. But he tried to have a arranged marriage with whatever GM he was looking for and Rex Ryan, and not everyone was going to sign up for that with a lame duck coach.
Well, yeah, that's why Itzik was the guy, because no one would take the job, and you can't do that.
There it is. So that's the biggest mistake that Woody has made. But again, I don't think I don't think we should be like groveling at his feet and saying he's the best owner in the world. But I also don't think the hate needs to be to the level that it is.
He did that, and he also forced them to trade for Tim Tebow in the same year. So
that was a bad move. That was a bad move.
2012 was a very low period for Jets fans between all that stuff and the butt fumble.
What's crazy is how awesome that year started. Like the blowout of Buffalo in the first game was just unreal, like totally unexpected. And then it just completely fell apart.
I remember they were 6-7 at one point. I'm like, this is the worst 6-7 team I've ever seen. Because I was like,
that Arizona game where
Greg came in. That Arizona game, and then the 2016 game against the Rams, I think it was like 10-7 also.
Bryce Petty. Cool. Oh yeah. Yeah.
They had that cool play where I think they did like
hook and ladder.
Hook and ladder, which was fun. But that game was rough.
Really good sport.
All right. So I'm assuming that there's going to be some clarity probably on something, whether it's Carr making a move, Rodgers making a move, somebody making a move on quarterback. We haven't talked about this in a bit in terms of predictions. Who's the Jets quarterback if you had to pick today in 2023?
I think the odds-on favorite is Aaron Rodgers.
Is that your picking?
That's who I'm picking. I think I'm willing it into existence, but I really do think it's going to happen. I just think that I think Green Bay has to make a decision on Jordan Love. And I think they're going to make that decision, and they have to roll with him. I think you've kind of been, reading things about how good he's looked. And I just think it's time. And I think this is going to kind of replay the Brett Favre thing from 15 years ago, where they're just kind of tired of the antics. And is he coming back? Is he not? But I think that he would want a fresh start. And I just think there's so many things that line up to say he should play for the New York Jets, and the Jets would be the best fit for him outside of Green Bay. I really believe that. So I think the history, 15 years ago, this happened with Brett. I think the relationship with Matt LaFleur and Saleh, I think there's an obvious respect there for Gutekunst and Joe Douglas. I think it'll happen. I think Aaron Rodgers, when all is said and done, is going to be the Jets opening day starter in 23.
From your lips to God's ears, I'm going the other direction. I'm going to say it's Jimmy Garoppolo. I want Rodgers. Let me make that very clear. Everyone will be like, oh, you're being negative. No, I want Rodgers. I don't know, man. He's just a weird guy, and I just don't feel like he doesn't want to deal with being in New York City. I mean, to me, like, why not live in New York City? You're really rich. You could have a driver take you from Manhattan to One Jets Drive. It's not that bad. But I don't know, man. I feel like he wants to play with Adams again. I know that that's like rumored. I'm not going off all these people who are sourcing it. I feel like he wants to be out west. I don't think he wants to come to the East Coast. Listen, I want to be wrong. I really do. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's going to be Jimmy G. Saleh will feel safe. Jimmy's a good locker room guy. Everyone in San Francisco liked him. So listen, it's not my favorite choice in the world, but it's something I can live with. I mean, I talked about this like a month ago. If they sign Carson Wentz, my God,
that's the one.
They can't do
anybody that. But. No, I agree. I remember the story of McCagnon. I'm sorry, not McCagnon. Tannenbaum, when he landed Favre, and like the work that he had to do, and he had to like find Favre like a hunting camp deep in New Jersey somewhere. And, like, it's like, you know what? Well, let's do that. Let's find him a bungalow where he can go to some darkness retreat. Mid-season. I don't care, on his bye week, like whatever. Like make it work. Do what you have to get the deal done. Like this has to happen. I really, I think the time for it to marinate is getting the best of me and a lot of Jets fans. But I feel like this has to happen. I think something needs to go our way, and this is the one that's finally going to.
Yeah, it's funny. You're not in our Discord yet. We'll get you in there.
All right.
I've done the research. There is a place within like an hour of one Jets drive where he can get his Ayushka, whatever the
There
hell.
you go.
I don't know.
See?
So I've done the research for Aaron. He can reach out to me if he comes here. I'll tell him where to go. All right.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be, I really, I'd be upset if they didn't land Aaron. I'm not expecting it. I'm hoping for it, but I do think that he's the favorite. I wouldn't be like upset with Jimmy Garoppolo. I think a lot of that, similar to the way you feel about Hackett. It's like, okay, you got Hackett, that's all fine, but it's dependent upon who they get as a quarterback. Same thing with Jimmy G. It's like, okay, well, that decision's dependent upon who comes back or who they sign as a backup quarterback, because that person's going to be playing.
Yeah, Jimmy can get the guys the ball. That's the thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah, I get it. It's not like the sexiest pick in the world, but he's fed Devo, he's fed Kittle, he's fed Ayuk, whomever you want to name, McCaffrey before he got hurt. The guy could get these playmakers the ball, and that's important, and we need that. Any closing thoughts, Steven, before we wrap this one up?
No, I mean, listen, it's going to be fun. Usually we wait till March, for this stuff to happen, and then it comes fast and furious, and it's free agency and then draft. But now we're kind of, football never loses, man. It takes over everything, and it just dominates every part of the year. There is no offseason in the NFL, so it's awesome. So hopefully we get an answer on the quarterback in the next few weeks. I'm kind of banking on maybe like a week after the Super Bowl and after Rodgers gets back from his darkness retreat, and he whatever illusions he has tells him to go to New York and be part of getting the Jets back to the Super Bowl and getting taking Joe Willie's retired number 12 and all that good stuff. But no, man, it was fun to get back in the saddle. It was good talking with you again, talking Jets. This is always fun. So good times, man. Appreciate you coming on.
Of course. We'll definitely do a show if any news breaks. If not, we'll definitely do some stuff in March when free agency comes. I know I've talked to a couple of people about coming on, some guys who cover the team, which will be pretty fun. And as a reminder, make sure to subscribe to this show on Apple, YouTube, and Spotify. For YouTube, it's youtube.com/turnthejets.tv. And then on Apple or Spotify, just search Turn on the Jets Live, and you'll see our logo, TOJ Live. And also, I'm assuming a lot of you already are, but if you're not a Patreon subscriber for Badlands, check it out. We have the new tier for $10 a month for the War Room, which is even more exclusive content, specifically video content and extra podcasts. And now there's also the Discord, which is really cool, and it's been fun connecting with a lot of people.